Euro Giannis makes his return. Frank's thoughts on the back of the roster and the most intriguing story going on in the NBA right now that comes your way next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined today by Frank Madden. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is here, and right now new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. Download the app at FanDuel.com to get started. Frank, I suppose everything we mentioned at the intro, we'll start with the easiest one here. Giannis made his return after a 2-game absence in Euro to lead Greece to a win. They had already clinched a spot in the top 16. But how much have you seen of Giannis in Euro so far besides today's game?
I've watched all the games, Justin. I'm doing my homework.
Did you pay the $20 for it, or did you find other ways?
Yeah, no, I subscribed to the FIBA Courtside Live app. First off, very annoying that, either NBA TV or ESPN doesn't just pony up the tiny amount of money it presumably would have taken to carry this in the US and, give us TV-based access to it. But yeah, I've used this Courtside app previously, and I always try to remember to cancel my subscription after these tournaments so that I don't, pay any more to it than I need to. But yeah, I've watched the 3 games that Giannis has played. I accidentally missed the prior 2, Cyprus, which I didn't even realize. I wasn't clear to me. I thought the Cyprus game, they may have just rested him because Cyprus is the hosts and they're terrible, so they didn't need him against Cyprus. But then holding him out the last game against our friends from Georgia, including I'm sorry, the Bosnia. I watched the Georgia game before that. I was like, wait a minute, no, I watched him play against Mamu and the Georgians, and Mamu had a huge dunk, by the way, in that game, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I've watched the 3 games Giannis has played, and it was actually pretty important that they win today, because if they finished 4th, if they had lost, I think there was a good chance they were going to finish 4th and thus play France in the round of 16, which nobody wants France, given how good even without Wemby, they're, one of the favorites. So now they get Israel, which certainly Israel is not a pushover either. I feel like every time I've seen Denny Avdia against the Bucks the last couple of years, he's like, looking like prime Miami LeBron or something, like getting like 18 free throws and whatever. But yeah, so now they have Israel. I can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday, but
Sunday.
But yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. Obviously they can advance, and obviously would be massive for Giannis to win any medal really. At the Euros, since it's been a minute since Greece has medaled internationally. And I don't know, I was thinking about that the other day. Like, I mean, if Giannis won any international tournament, whether it's EuroBasket, World Cup, obviously Olympics, I mean, I have to imagine in many ways that maybe it wouldn't be quite winning an NBA championship, but in terms of what it means for him, as a Greek, as someone obviously that, grew up having to basically fight for his identity as a Greek citizen, and not getting his official citizenship till he was, 18 years old or whatever it was. It obviously has a pronounced meaning for him, and we'll see what happens. Greece are not the favorites, but they, I think, at least have a fighting chance. And I think what we saw today, Giannis, I think he had 25, 14, 9 assists, and it was very obvious that Spain, which they're the reigning champs, they're now bounced from the tournament. They were not going to let Giannis, really get room to beat them one-on-one. So they just kind of doubled him immediately, 3-2 zoned him, all that stuff. And he had 4 assists in the first quarter, and then got it going a bit offensively in the second quarter. and then ultimately finished with 25, and had a couple of big buckets in the fourth quarter down the stretch as well. So it was fun to watch him do Giannis stuff and have to play make, and obviously just physically dominate as well. The FIBA rules obviously can lead to more congestion in the paint, but he's Giannis. He's a problem solver. So it's been fun to watch. I think he's had 31, 29, and 25 now in the 3 games. So I mean, he's obviously just been putting up the massive Giannis numbers that we're accustomed to.
They play Sunday afternoon. I don't know if this is Eastern time or if what I'm looking at has already converted it.
Packers or Greece
to Central. Well, it's right in the almost perfect time. So it's 1:45 that they play. But it's either 1:45 or 12:45, depending on if this is Eastern time I'm looking at. But regardless, it should time out pretty close to perfectly to get a double dip to see Giannis in the round of 16, and then the Packers open their season shortly after that. When we touched on the point production we've seen from him, I'm not trying to, based on what we've seen Giannis do in Euro against some of those teams, here's what to expect. But one of the things Camille and I were talking about the other day with Van Fias on their show was the numbers for Giannis and what to expect. What do you think he's more likely to set a career high in this season, points or assists?
Hashtag why not both meme.
Both.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, it's sort of interesting. There have been a few seasons where I've wondered, is this the year that Giannis could average like 7 or 8 assists? And it's always sort of gravitated back to, 6 or so per game. He's never veered far under or above that number. So I think you could certainly make the case that this year might be different just because they're going to need him to make more. So I think my first inclination would be assists, but you just think about how much they're going to need him to score as well. And so I think, if you're doing over-unders, you'd probably start with his career high. I'd probably say, maybe, I don't know if I'd say the over-under is 7 assists per game, but I think that there's a pretty decent chance this could be the year that he finally kind of, breaks that and gets into the kind of career high assist numbers. Now, I don't think he's going to be like 8 or 9 assists a game.
You don't think he's going to average a triple double?
But who knows? No, I don't think that. But I don't know. I mean, and the reality is, like, I mean, Giannis likes getting assists. Like, I'm not saying he's like, cares about his stats as much as I do, Justin. But we always see it when he's close to triple double. He knows it, and he goes assist hunting, and whatever. So we'll see. But I'm sure that's in the back of his mind, the idea of basically being a more dynamic passer and showing that of course I think he absolutely wants to win an MVP this year. Perhaps more so just because, he probably realizes that winning a championship is going to be harder than it's been, in recent years, even when the team hasn't come close to that in recent years either. So we'll see. But I don't know. It's a great question. I can't have a hard time choosing. I think he's got a great chance to do both.
So, I mean, that's where I kind of landed too, of like, well, I think it'll probably be the high in both, but I almost identical to your answer. Like, I know at one point Camille and I threw out the 32 and 8, which is more likely. I think I could see both, but not those numbers specifically, career highs, but just like by 1/10 of a point that he's setting those career highs. So it's not like a massive jump. But when you mentioned he loves getting assists, how many of those assists are going to come to Thanasis Antetokounmpo? That was the big news from over the weekend, something you basically called your shot on, and it came to fruition. So we'll dig into that discussion of the back of the roster and the return of Thanasis coming up after this. Well, the NFL season is now here, and FanDuel is making things all the more easy to get you ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You'll love using FanDuel. It's easier than ever. You can build a same-game parlay, jump in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. Quick and easy to use, and it's the best part of adding more energy to your Sundays. If you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now and visit FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, so Sunday leading into Labor Day, we get the news that Thanasis has returned to the Bucks, signing a 1-year deal. And I guess we'll start with way back when you predicted it would be the weekend of Labor Day that we'd finally get news Labor Day weekend that Thanasis signs. It's here, and it gives the Bucks 17 players right now. Only 15 of those contracts are fully guaranteed. I mean, we've touched on Andre Jackson Jr. in the back of the roster quite a bit and got your thoughts on it earlier in the offseason. It seems like a foregone conclusion that Andre Jackson Jr. is just going to get waived. I know a lot of Bucks fans and people in our comments have said, well, you got to trade him. I don't know what the market is, and any team that does have an interest in him is just going to say, you got to cut him. So we'll just not give up an asset and sign him. The other interesting name, though, is Amir Coffey, and I know it generated a lot of excitement, but I think Camille and I talked about this earlier in the week. If we kind of take a step back and examine things and think, man, how did it go this long? And this was all he got. Ask yourself those questions again, and there has to be okay, I just don't know what the value is for Amir Coffey. He's a fine player, but I think we may have overinflated what he is just because the Bucks have that need on the perimeter. And, if it went into August for him to get a camp deal, I think relationship with Doc Rivers or not, I think that kind of shows you of what the view is of Amir Coffey across the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a competition in camp. Like I would say to sort of start with that. And I think the competitors for effectively, I guess, one spot would be Andre Jackson Jr., Amir Coffey. And then I have to think Tyler Smith is not like a foregone conclusion that he's safe, just because we've seen so little from him over the past year in terms of, again, like I'm not going to sit here and say that I have like a compelling view of like strong view of what he did as a preseason rookie last year, but he didn't obviously stand out in a meaningful way.
That was the high point.
He didn't really stand out in like a meaningful way in the garbage time situations. His G League numbers regressed last year relative to his last year with the G League Ignite before he was drafted. And then obviously the summer league was a major letdown. And again, like he's primarily, a stretch four. And when he's not stretching and hitting threes, like, he doesn't really do a whole lot. So that obviously played into the disappointing summer league performance that we saw. So we'll see. I mean, he has a guaranteed contract. Andre Jackson does not. That matters. So I think it's very fair to say that Andre would be the logical first one out the door. But as we've discussed, this is different from prior years, right? When the Bucks were way over the tax and, straddling the second apron and all that, and, worried about hard caps and things of that nature, cutting any guaranteed contract like really matters, because that's, that means you gotta, if you're going to fill that spot, then, you just wasted $2 million or whatever it is that you just cut. And you may need to maneuver just to be able to even manage that around the cap. Bucks aren't in that situation this year. I mean, they could waive Tyler Smith and, Amir Coffey's obviously not guaranteed, so they could waive him. They could waive Andre's partial guarantee. They could waive Chris Livingston again for the second time this summer. If they
I was going to say, we left him off. Do you see them pulling the fantasy football move of like, cut him, sign him, cut him?
it would just seem like such a it would be such an obvious like admission of a mistake, right? Because like you waived him, and it's not like he was going to have like a really robust market, and then you went and immediately signed him back to a guaranteed contract. Now there is like, clutch stuff in the air around this too, like how much the fact that Chris Livingston shares an agent with Gary Trent, who signed on a bargain deal again. I have no idea. I'm not going to sit here and tell you like that. It's definitely a conspiracy theory, and like they had to re-sign Chris Livingston in order to get Gary Trent because Rich Paul is looking out for his guys. Wherever I have no idea. Like I don't think these things are like completely disconnected, but I also like can't sit here and tell you that it's definitely like that's definitely what happened. And the same way, like Gary Harris getting a 1+1. Right around the same time that they signed Miles Turner, who has the same agent. Seems like quite a coincidence. We'll talk about, it's not nearly as interesting a conspiracy theory as the Kawhi Leonard stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I don't know. It's hard to say. And to be honest, like if you ask me, like, like me, if I walk in the door and you give me the keys to the kingdom and I can release whoever I want, I would look at Gary Harris and be like, Gary, I don't really see the point of Gary Harris, given the way he's looked the last couple of years. He was a guy I used to actually look at as a guy that I would take a flyer on, and then kind of just really has not just rediscovered seemingly anything the last couple of years. But who knows? Maybe something changes, but I don't really think, I kind of hope he doesn't play much, because if he does, that probably means that guys got hurt that we'd rather see play. So
did Doc or John Horst? I thought John Horst said they basically view him as the Pat Connaughton replacement, which I think you would look at and say, fine, perfect. That's
what does that even mean?
I would.
What does that even mean, Justin?
Guy that wears a number that ends in a 4, seldom plays, and you look at him and you say, like,
is he investing in real estate or something?
Yeah, I remember when you used to be much better than this.
Yeah. I don't. It's tough to say. I mean, but Gary Harris is probably happy to have 2 years guaranteed. So I'd be surprised if he like causes problems or something. But yeah. I mean, probably not a guy that you'd expect a whole lot from. So yeah, I think, I mean, if I was going to predict it right now, I'd say Andre's probably gone, and then I'm just really curious, like, does Amir Coffey show enough, or do they have enough belief in him that that they would waive Tyler Smith in addition to Andre Jackson Jr.? Because I mean, the optics are not great. I don't know that people other than like us and sickos, like all of the dear listeners and watchers of our show, like obviously we're a community of people that care enough to like scrutinize these things, but does the average season ticket holder like bat an eye at Tyler Smith getting waived or Andre Jackson Jr. getting waived? I think Ajax, like, that would cause some
Andre Jackson Jr.
pushback.
Yes,
yeah.
Frank.
I think people would. I think people
basing
would
it off of
that.
social media and the comments of these shows. Yes, it generates a reaction. And the other, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what do you decide with that, because I think Camille's talked about this before. Like, one of the things about John Horst is he has a willingness to, essentially admit a mistake and quickly move on from it. And it's tough to say Tyler Smith has been a mistake when it's been 1+ year, but you just have not seen any trajectory. It's been a downslope for him here. And especially when you look at things like Summer League, it's not necessarily an indicator of future success, but it's also one of those things with, like, I at least need to see that, though. Like, it doesn't mean you're going to be a great NBA player or even a very good role player, but I just can't have you look like you did in Summer League.
Yeah. And I mean, I think for me, I just look back on draft night in general, and, going into that draft with the late first and the early second, we were all sitting around saying, like, well, they're going to do some sort of trade, right? Like, maybe they don't trade both the picks, whatever it might be, but it just felt like something was going to happen, given just the urgency the Bucks had going into last season in terms of, positioning themselves from a competitiveness standpoint. to then take like two guys who
Two projects.
were both like really project like. And of course, you know, AJ Johnson ends up getting traded in a trade that, like, you know, it didn't exactly help the Bucks on the floor anyway. But his
technically did, though, because didn't they throw cash into the Jericho Sims deal, which they could not have done without that trade?
Okay, fair enough, Justin. You got me that one. But yeah, and by the way, I'll say this too. Like AJ Johnson, like, has had some really nice highlights since he left. But I feel like, and he had like a couple games where he put up some raw numbers. But like his numbers were in the aggregate like terrible in Washington. Like he played because, you know, they were sort of playing him. But, you know, similarly kind of Vegas, it seems like he had another sort of up and down kind of thing. Like he has amazing, you know, dunks in the open court and stuff, but it's kind of like what we saw, you know, a year ago, summer league and preseason and stuff. It's just like how that all, like the connective tissue of him actually being like a lead guard type guy, like it's very, you know, kind of unfinished product, you know, very, very rough gem that I have no idea like if he's going to pan out. But he's fun, he's exciting. Like you'll definitely see stuff on Twitter, you know, where you'll say like, oh man, threw down another awesome dunk. Like, God, we traded him for we traded him for Kyle Kuzma, you know. I don't know. My guess is he doesn't end up being, you know, the missing piece that the Bucks, you know, needed in the post Dame era, but we'll see. But yeah, it is hard to look back, you know, especially I think John Horst deserves a ton of credit for what he's done on the margins of the roster, and, you know, especially kind of veteran signings, what he's done with minimums, etc. But just another draft night, I think, you know, you look back on now with AJ Johnson, you know, gone, and whatever, who knows what he'll become, and then Tyler Smith, obviously, you know, what could you have done differently? Who knows? We obviously, I don't think it's because they got tons of amazing value offers and they just didn't want to do those deals. But yeah, it is interesting to wonder like what else could they have done, or, you know, even if it's just like punting the picks to like future drafts or something, like if they didn't see somebody like. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but, you know, this has been the Achilles heel of the John Horst era has been obviously the lack of value they've gotten out of the draft. And let's just say Vegas didn't really give me a ton of confidence in our dear Vogelube. But you know, we'll see. He'll be out of sight, out of mind for a little bit.
There's one other question I had to throw at you about the back of the roster and Thanasis, but actually we've already kind of plowed over that piece of grass quite a bit. And the last thing to get to, I think, is going to take more time, and it's certainly much more interesting.
Well, I'll just say, just to recap, my historically, like, I have not been somebody who gets up in arms about Thanasis getting the last roster spot. That said, do I think Thanasis is going to help the Bucks on the floor? You know, absolutely not. That said, I've always heard from people in sort of the orbit of the team that he actually was always been very well liked,
teammate,
great guy, great teammate, locker room guy, practice guy, all of that. And I think especially right now where the temperature around Giannis, I mean, again, I'm not going to put my head in the sand and say that like Giannis is never going to leave and Bucks can just do whatever they want and he'll just stay forever. Like, I think you have to be aware that like at some point Giannis could decide like there may be better things elsewhere. And, you know, that was my point, like in early August, like to be honest, probably my two best calls of the summer, Justin, were Thanasis related. Cause on draft night, I remember someone tweeted like, Giannis is, you know, like looking for this, and the Bucks, Giannis is like trying to compete for a championship, and the Bucks draft rando Serbian guy. And my response was, the Bucks drafting a guy who's not going to take a roster spot is exactly what Giannis would wanted, because it means there's room for his brother Thanasis. So cha-ching, I was right on that. And then, as you alluded to, I'll take my mini Victor laps. I guess I don't know how many of them I get. I said all Giannis, like I think we talked about the last time I was on, right? Like, I think Giannis's decision this summer, like people, I don't know, like Shams and everybody's like, it's like, oh, is they competing for a championship? Look, I know Giannis has said that. I'm sure Giannis wants to compete for championships. It matters to him. But I think this is so much more of just like a vibes thing. And does he like being in Milwaukee? Yes. Does he see another place as being some obvious, home run for him to go to that meets all his needs? Probably not. And, like if he can stay here, compete for an MVP, honestly, not have that much pressure in terms of winning a championship. If they do well, he's going to get all the credit. And if they lose, he's not going to get any blame. And on top of that, he gets to play again with his brother. His family's settled here. Like, it's just a comfortable place for him to be. And I think it could change in a year. But I'm happy to just keep Giannis, and I'm not going to sweat, having to waive a young guy, which isn't great, not ideal. Roster spots matter, blah, blah, blah. But, forest for the trees, like, let's do this, TA. Like, bring the party back from the first row to the sideline. I guess he's still going to be in the first row. He's just going to be wearing a Bucks jersey in a warm up instead of sitting courtside in street clothes.
Really, the biggest surprise in all of it was that it wasn't a 3+1 for Thanasis. Let's keep him here for a while.
I mean, they technically had his bird rights, because he'd been with the Bucks for years and then didn't sign elsewhere last year. So, although, I think, did they have to renounce his? I'd have to double check. Did they have to renounce his rights in order to sign Miles Turner? I don't know. Who cares? It doesn't matter.
Speaking of bird rights, that's where it starts to get interesting. So the big bombshell that came out and regarding Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, what to make of that, what the rest of the league thinks about that, what Frank thinks about it. We'll dig into that coming up next. So this report by Pablo Torre, and Pablo Torre finds out. I saw the tweet come out in the morning with the high level, here's what we found. Just kind of glanced past it and thought like, oh, wow. But then you kind of did a double take of like, oh, wait. Circumventing the cap. No, I got to go back to this and read this. It seems pretty damning. And is it a smoking gun necessarily? No, but I've talked about it with a few others who have kind of maintained, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, that I ultimately just don't see anything happening here in terms of punishment because it's going to be tough to prove. The tricky thing is you don't technically have to prove all that much the way that it's set up with the power that Adam Silver has. But I do think there's going to be a punishment because I think the rest of the owners, most of the owners, are going to be urging the league to hand out a severe punishment because this is basically NIL. If this is what happened, and they don't have the pockets that Steve Ballmer does, where it's then them saying, well, wait a minute, we definitely can't compete with this. So I don't know how severe. I don't think it's going to be like, unless something else comes out, I don't think it's going to be the Joe Smith 5 draft picks lost, but I could see some type of Steve Ballmer is barred from, being involved with the Clippers for a handful of months or something, and a suspension for like Lawrence Frank and a loss of a pick or something like that.
Yeah, I first off, I just think this whole story is just so interesting, and I don't like hate the Clippers or anything like that. So I mean, that part is sort of incidental to it, but I listened to the podcast the morning that it came out, and then I was just waiting. I was so eager to hear what, first off, like the other like newsbreakers were going to say about it. Given that, they all have to be connected to lots of teams, including the Clippers, right? I wanted to hear the tenor of like, what are teams telling those guys? Yeah. Because as you were alluding to, so much of this kind of comes down to like, because the the NBA owners are a fraternity basically, right? Adam Silver works for them. Adam Silver has like large latitude to punish teams for things like this the way that he sees fit. I mean, like, and things can be I think like appealed and things like that. Like Joe Smith, it was a 5 first-round picks, and then it got reduced to 3. Which is still horrible if that happens to your team. But it is, I've just been so interested in just sort of seeing the reaction to it, because I think there, on the one hand, there is the, well, like the I think a lot of people thought, well, do owners really want to open this can of worms? Because are there other unseemly things that they might now get dinged on? And it's ironically, I've seen like a few people like reference like, oh well, the Bucks like signing Giannis's brother. It's like Bucks are really smart about it. They just put their like circumvention right on the cap sheet, right? So it's like, he's on the team, we're paying him. Like there's nothing under the table about this. Like,
well, and I mean, and I can, to that point, I mean, I can tell you the Bucks were very aware of that type of thing, so much so that when they launched their own entity in this space with the Bucks Plus podcast network, Thanasis was pitched to be a part of that, from not by the organization, but another group that controls that. And it was squashed by the Bucks because that could be viewed as cap circumvention of like, how much is this guy making in ad sales off of his podcast?
Yeah. I mean, we're swimming in cash, that sweet podcast cash. We can only imagine, how much the Thanasis could make. But yeah, it's just really interesting. And I think that's probably been the part that has been the most interesting to me, because I mean, there is a history of this, right? Like, I mean, literally teams were apparently so pissed off about the rumblings that Kawhi Leonard's uncle Dennis had been blatantly asking for illegal, payments and access to
travels,
boats,
tickets,
and planes. Yeah. And, like, so there was literally an investigation in 2019 when the original signing happens. All this stuff happened, 2-3 years later. So it's not like they missed it at that point, although who knows what might have happened, and there just wasn't any paper trail on it. But like Kawhi and the Clippers have been, I would say, there's been, I don't know if I'd say a target on their back, but there obviously has been a lot of smoke about them for years, and I think teams have been wary of them for years. And so, like, are they the team that would be the most likely team to draw the ire of other owners if something like this happens? Like, they'd definitely be up there. I don't know if they'd be number one, but they'd definitely be up there. And he is the richest NBA owner. He is the guy who needs the least help in terms of like being able to do this sort of underhanded stuff. And so I think listening to just podcasts, Zach Lowe talked about it a lot today. I thought Nate Duncan,
I was going to say,
had a really I think good, because he was looking at, like, I think Nate and Zach both touched on the legalities and the CBA kind of aspects of it. And
for those that don't know, that's Nate Duncan's background.
Yeah, he's a lawyer by trade. And I think the key things to call out are, the CBA doesn't like require there to be a smoking gun, or like, this isn't a court of law. Adam Silver, if he thinks like there's very obviously something fishy here, like he could bring the hammer down on them. And I think when you look at it, right, I think really the most damning part of it is there's no market reason why this aspiration company would pay Kawhi Leonard $7 million a year, even if he was like actively doing stuff for them, like even if he was like tweeting, hashtag aspiration, whatever, like there was never any like market-based reason, like, and it would be interesting to see kind of what some of these other, celebrity endorsement deals looked like. Some of them may have been involved with equity, which makes it a little bit kind of murkier. But if he's like, I think what was said was like everybody else together was not close to what he was making.
To what he was.
That obviously speaks to the fact that like this was not just like, this was not a market-based thing, and that is pretty material to, essentially adjudicating anything around this. I think if you're the NBA, is that there isn't any rational reason why he would have been getting $7 million a year to do even something, let alone nothing, So it stinks in ways that, other players have gotten endorsements from team sponsors, but there's nobody seems to be aware of anything of this magnitude, let alone for doing nothing. So it's just it's just extremely fishy. And I just, we're recording this while this interview is probably going to air.
Sit down is
the sit down. And like, I don't think anybody's going to do that. Like, I'm sure Steve Ballmer has plausible deniability. I doubt that there's going to be an email or a text from him saying like, make sure Kawhi gets his $28 million or whatever. Like
make sure they can't trace this back to him.
Yeah, exactly. I would be surprised if there ever was anything quite that direct. But there doesn't
if there's the Brett Favre text.
Exactly. But there doesn't have to be. And, again, like the NBA doesn't have like, they don't have like subpoena power. They can't force, people from aspiration to testify about what may or may not have happened. But I mean, Pablo Torre got, apparently 7 people to basically tell him that this was exactly what we're all speculating it is, including the one person on that had kind of their voice modulated or whatever, who said like this is for cap circumvention, LOL, like this is what we were told. So I mean, if those people are talking to the NBA at some point, then that plus just the fact that this makes no sense unless it is some sort of kickback. I think the Clippers just are they're gonna get. It just seems like they probably have to get nailed for something.
There's gonna be something, I think,
especially especially as you're saying, if the NBA's owners are up in arms and they view this as like this merits something, then I don't know how Adam Silver, who I mean they've at least tried to talk up the idea of pushing back on some of the like thing the tampering stuff, which let's be honest, is not as severe as cap circumvention,
No.
So I just think
especially when it's tampering with your own player.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, John Horst got fined $50,000 for saying he was going to offer Giannis a supermax. I mean, it's just like still is like hilarious. So I don't know if I was going to put my over under, I would say I think there's going to be two. I think there's going to be two first round picks that they'll lose. And the part that I just really find, the thing that I don't know if it would happen, the thing that I think is the most interesting, because let's be honest, I mean, if they ban Steve Ballmer for a year, like, does that change the Clippers like fortunes really? Like, not really. It's just, punishing rich guys, which, I think we can all get behind seeing that from time to time. If they did it before the All-Star game, that would be hilarious, right? If he couldn't even come to the All-Star game in his new building, like that would just be
we're
hilarious.
Moving the All-Star game.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're giving it to Charlotte, North Carolina.
But I think the thing that's most interesting to me is like, would they do something? Would they actually consider annulling Kawhi's contract? Which I don't think there's any precedent for something of that magnitude in terms of, basically saying this contract is no longer valid. Sorry, Kawhi, you're now a free agent. You're not getting $50 million this year. You're going to have to go, sign for the taxpayer mid-level with some random team. That would be, I mean, just from, if you enjoy chaos, that's what you should be rooting for, because that's at least possible. Because certainly the player was very aware. I mean, the only person that I think we can feel confident, like definitely like knew something foul was going on was Kawhi Leonard in his representation. I would feel pretty confident that Steve Ballmer didn't just coincidentally have, a team he dumped a ton of money into, like throwing money for no reason at Kawhi Leonard. But Kawhi losing out of all this would be pretty funny. It's I don't know, people, there's always been, I know people's like, oh well, the Clippers are trying to save up to make a run at Giannis in 2027, and to me I'm just like, like, first off, just get over it. Like, Giannis, I'm not going to say Giannis is definitely a buck in 2027, but he's signing an extension somewhere. He's not hitting, I'd be shocked if he hit free agency somewhere.
Yes. I mean, just knowing Giannis is not going to leave money on the table either. So if he's not Milwaukee, I still see him signing an extension with the Bucks, and then something happens.
What is it? 4 years, $300 million or something he can get next summer?
Yeah, you're not walking away from that.
I mean, remember when he signed the last one and he was basically like, oh yeah, Thanasis was saying, it was like, if you sign now, then you can opt out earlier, and then you can get even more money, So like they did the math. So again, I always think back to the bubble when Giannis had the bags of the water and he found the free water and he's yelling at the camera, free water, and he's filling up his bags with free water. Like, Giannis, he's a businessman. He knows where to get his money.
I mean, you brought it up, but like the one that has no plausible deniability is Kawhi Leonard, because like at no point did the thought like this is fine, right? I get this money and I don't have to do anything. And there was, did you see the additional report that came out from the Boston Sports Journal that, hey, we actually uncovered a second payment that moves closer to the $50 million figure that Steve Ballmer invested in that company, which, if that is the case, and I haven't read that story, just saw the headline, then it's getting pretty hard to distance yourself from. So you invested $50 million in this company, and Kawhi Leonard made $50 million and had to do nothing. Steve Ballmer's, I'm assuming, defense too of plausible deniability, and I didn't know what happened. So we are expected to believe either, despite these coincidences, you had no idea this was happening, or you're a smart guy, but not smart enough to figure out that there was some kind of odd shell pyramid scheme going on with this company and you were just duped by them. Like, one of the two is not adding up here.
I thought the Cuban defense, like Mark Cuban was maybe the first person from like first important person in the NBA sort of sphere to comment. And it was it was an interesting comment. It was like a long tweet. And it superficially, it was like, he said, I'm Team Ballmer, right?
Yeah.
But if you sort of like peel it back a little bit, his basic argument was like, well, clearly Steve wouldn't be this stupid.
He's not an idiot. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because like the kind of phrases that we've heard repeated a lot in this is, on the one hand, like, well, nobody could be this stupid, which first off, like, rich people are stupid constantly. Exhibit A, you got screwed by this company in the first place, right? And that's sort of the irony, is like, well, they clearly wouldn't be this stupid to tamper. And then the other side is, they just got screwed because they got scammed by this scammy company, right? Which is like, so they scammed everyone except Kawhi Leonard. Like they took money from everybody, but then they only gave it to Kawhi Leonard.
We'll hold up our end of the bargain with you,
master negotiator Kawhi Leonard, who literally has nothing to offer this business, is the only one coming out on the positive end of this, spectacular like failure of a business. It's just, I mean, I don't know. A lot of the arguments just have not. And the other Cuban thing was like him saying like, oh well, he wouldn't have let the company fail because he would have known that, whatever.
It was unknown until Pablo Torre discovered it.
Like, this is, I mean, granted, the arrest, I think, was the spring of the founder, but it's not like they went bankrupt like a month ago or something. I think Pablo had been working on this for 7 months or something else, something like that. So yeah, I think, and there's also a history here, right? I mean, I think Ballmer was fined $500,000 for basically offering guaranteed endorsements to DeAndre Jordan, like in 2016 or whatever the heck it was that free agency happened. So I mean, like, the magnitude of that obviously is small compared to 28 million, or maybe it was 50 million or whatever it ends up coming out as. But yeah, I hope I think the soap opera drama is hilarious. I hope the Clippers get screwed, because I think they were cheating, and I'm not going to say that no team has ever done this before, but just the scale and scope. Because that's the other thing I've heard as well. Like, Kirk Goldsberry was talking about it. Like, I think Kirk Goldsberry was talking about with Zach Lowe, that he was talking to like a GM or something like that, and like basically they were just like, people don't do this. Like if people think that like everybody's doing this, like they're not. Like, people are afraid
like his point was like
this.
It's not everybody's doing it. There are probably some that are doing it, but most teams are too terrified over this fallout of like, there's no coming back from that. So like, yeah, I'm sure it's just like college sports in the 90s and in early 2000s where like, yeah, there's definitely some programs that are paying kids, but like, we're not going to do it because what if we get caught?
Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, I cannot wait to see what else comes out. I can't wait to see the sit down that Steve Ballmer did. I mean, it is somewhat curious that you don't just address it with the person that had this investigative reporting and instead have a sit down interview. I don't mean it in a fully derogatory or bad way, but it's a safe space with the reporter that he chose to have this sit down with, that I don't anticipate Steve Ballmer being grilled at all over this.
Yeah, it was curious. Sham's lack of immediate tweeting about it was kind of like,
I mean, we could get
newsbreakers got to be careful. Mark Stein, I remember Mark Stein tweeted pretty early about it and like was leaning into, you know, he was not trying to downplay it. So I was like, okay, Mark, you're not worried about, you know, ruffling feathers. But yeah, I mean, then there was an allusion to this. I think it was the guy's name was Harrison Sanford. I think he said it. He's got like a podcast with Danny Green, and I think he's affiliated with ESPN somehow. And he was basically like, I wouldn't do this because I want to be able to interview Kawhi, and I don't want to like whatever. And it was like, I almost appreciate the transparency, but also like, okay, like, so you're just saying like Pablo Torre is like an actual journalist and you're not. But I think that's the reality, right? Like for something like this to come out, it sort of has to be from sort of an outsider who's not on the, like this, it makes sense that this would never come out, you know, from someone just on the Clippers beat, because basically your incentives just are not aligned.
What if it was
in the right way?
Shoots his going away gift just back from the dead.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, it was interesting. Like Bobby Marks was like, when Bobby Marks was talking about it a bit, and then he was talking about how he actually they were actually investigated by the NBA when Andrei Kirilenko turned down a big team option and then re-signed a new deal, and because you know Kirilenko being Russian and you know the Russian ownership that they had, that they had to go through this whole investigative process. I also was like kind of curious too, because I mean Bobby Marks used to work with Lawrence Frank, right? Yep. So like it's you know, these relationships create interesting kind of connections.
And Pablo has already said he has set his sights on the Knicks and has had some people reach out to him about the Jalen Brunson contract.
Yes, let's take down Jalen Brunson. Although it was a little weird because I saw the clip of him, and he was saying, you know, the context was he was talking about people like his tip line has never gotten more calls, and you know, and he alluded to Jalen Brunson joining the Knicks, which to me was like, Jalen Brunson got paid more than the Mavericks offered. So it's not like he took a sweetheart deal to sign with the Knicks. His dad having an assistant coaching job, like obviously, like, you know, like there was some very openly kind of dubious stuff going on. I don't think anything that, you know, necessarily merits an investigation, but the extension he signed obviously is very different because that was way under market and, you know, earlier and really helped them. So would be curious if to maybe do some forensics and see if there's been any alternate sources of income for Jalen Brunson since he signed that contract. Yes. Well, come on, Pablo, take down all the Bucks rivals. You got to take that. Then let's focus on Cleveland. What is Dan Gilbert up to? Is Evan Mobley, then all of a sudden, Mobley getting paid by, you know, a local sub shop $5 million a year mysteriously?
Pablo just takes down those teams one by one, and then all of a sudden it's, how have the Milwaukee Bucks convinced these players to take the league minimum year after year? And it actually turns out the barber that was suing Malik Beasley is involved in all of this. After all, is the way that it ties back together. But your ultimate like chaos theory too of what happens if the contract is voided and Kawhi Leonard hits the market, then we will hear from Shams, I would assume, and it's going to be that Kawhi is open to exploring all options that are out there.
Yeah. By the way,
just copy paste the tweet and replace the names.
If you're not on Twitter, you missed a great tweet from the Bucks social media account after Giannis had his 4 assists in the first quarter for Greece today. They tweeted out Giannis exploring all his options with 4 assists in the first quarter. Chef's kiss. Well played. Good stuff.
And that Harrison Sanford line too was, if I found that out, I'm not reporting that because I'm not trying to get on Kawhi's bad side. So, I mean, journalism at its finest in 2020.
I mean, that like, I would suggest like all/most beat writers would probably take that same angle. So I'm not going to say
it to
that,
someone.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that like that is some like bizarre, unjournalistic thing. But I agree. Like, you know, I don't think you're going to sit on it, like bury it for the guy. I think you just probably hand it off to somebody else who can get their hands dirty and doesn't have anything to lose, like, you know, a beat writer would.
Yeah, now that as we finish recording this, we'll turn on ESPN and see all the nuggets that have come out, and maybe the stories have evolved even more now. But this is going to be really fascinating to follow for the next few days, and especially if this thing lingers on, and which I don't expect this to be a Tuesday. We have the findings, and here's what Adam Silver's handing out. Like it's gonna drag on to an extent, but
months. This is like months and months and months.
Yeah,
like if this gets adjudicated this season, I'd be surprised.
Like something really bad happened where it was like, wow, you were this dumb to leave this in there. Even thinking ahead to like Bucks Media Day and hey Doc, did you know about any of this stuff and those types of questions?
Oh yeah, and actually that was probably the biggest Bucks
Doc
connection.
Rivers was involved, but actually
Doc
did
Rivers
work for that company.
Right, Doc Rivers was referenced as, I can't remember if he had like invested money in Aspiration or if he had I mean, I think he had done some endorsement type thing, but Doc did not get $28 million out of it. So, but anyway,
who's gonna
ask the tough questions on Bucks Media Day about the bankruptcy of Aspiration? And did you know about the $28 million, Doc?
Oh my god! Like that, I just dawning too. Like, does the league teams still stream their stuff like Clippers Media Day? Because everybody still does it on the same day, unless the teams that were playing overseas would always do it like a week earlier, but otherwise it's always that Monday. Man, Clippers Media Day is going to be wild this year.
In like the funniest way possible, because the like worst interview in the NBA is the guy that everybody would want to talk to about this. But, you know, but anyway, it should be noted, Doc left the Clippers after the bubble in 2020.
Yes.
So he was not actually like with the Clippers at the time that these, you know, the no-show contract was actually signed. So for what it's worth, Doc doesn't really have any background. Well, I'm sure Doc knows plenty, but Doc also has, let's say, has plausible deniability. And as much as Doc likes to talk, I'm going to go ahead and guess he's not going to, you know, break this case open any further against his former employers. But although who knows? I don't know. Maybe did he leave? Did he leave?
Did he leave on good terms?
On good time. We'll find out.
The Sopranos World account tweeting out one of the shots from the Pine Barrens episode with the Russian in the woods, and you have Paulie and Christopher walking behind him with guns, and it's just the caption of Kawhi and Steve Ballmer showing Pablo Torre where all the trees are planted. Well, I guess we look forward to seeing what came from this sit down with Steve Ballmer and what else develops from this situation, and especially if this branches off into more teams, as Pablo hinted at, and what we start to discover. But like one way or another, this is a problem. Not like, I'm not saying this was a clear, like this is a huge problem. Like the big picture is a problem the league was not prepared for, of like, oh, so teams kind of figured this thing out, and now we're going to have to figure out how to police it. Cause like, can you can you police players taking endorsements? No, but like, how do you try to set some guardrails in place of like, there can be no one in the ownership group that has any type of vested interest in any company that you're having this relationship with or something like this. But even then, what's to stop them from setting up their rich friend to do that? So we'll see how they choose to handle this.
Yeah. We'll see. Maybe we'll start hearing about Pat Connaughton and all of his business dealings and, with Bucks ownership. I don't know. Did Mike Fascitelli invest with it? I think there may have been something
did.
like that.
Yeah.
Like would Pat Connaughton have really resigned if the Bucks couldn't have offered some sweet co-investment in real estate? Like Pat Connaughton could have explored his options, Justin, before taking that sweetheart contract that they had to salary dump this past summer. So I don't think that's going to be the top of anybody's list. I don't think Pablo's going to spend a lot of time on Pat Connaughton's contract stuff.
Unless it turns out that Vasilicic is not actually playing overseas, and then we have to do some investigation there. Like, wait a minute, you gave up how much money, and now you're not actually playing?
Has anybody seen?
Can we confirm this?
Is he alive? Proof of life. Good times. Good times in September in the NBA.
It is time. So we got the top 100 list coming up next week. Camille is working on an NBA 2K simulation, so we'll see how they feel about the Bucks and their chances.
Better her than us, Justin.
Season.
That was the easiest call of who's going to do that.
We will we'll have all that and more coming up next week on the show. That'll do it for today, though. For Frank, I'm Justin. We'll catch up with you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.